Welcome back, everybody, to the Card Chatter podcast with Refractor Jones and BobblesAndBallcards. Hope you all are doing well out there. Hope you had a wonderful week last week and really enjoyed episodes 1 through 3. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Please hit that thumbs up and let us know how we're doing. And as always, comment down below and share your thoughts on the topics. So, how are you doing, Refractor? Did you have a good weekend?
I had a fantastic weekend. It was great. I did a lot of charity work this weekend, so it was all good.
Good to hear. Good to hear. We have a fun one. Now, you left us off at the end of episode 3 with a statement you made that really caught my attention because I think it's something um, I know myself, and I think a lot of others also kind of feel the same way. And we can tie this into something that excitingly happened last night. But you made
Wait,
the statement.
what happened last night?
I heard that some common cards sold for a few pennies or something like that. That
Oh
there was some
yeah,
rumor
yeah,
that I seen this morning. Um, yeah, it was like 12.6 cents or something like that. I think
yeah,
some guy named
yeah.
Mickey. I don't know if it was Mouse or yeah.
Yeah. Definitely wouldn't have been the mouse because I'm not a Mickey Mouse fan. But
um, but no, you made the comment late going heading out of episode 3 of needing a 10 versus a 9. And
mhm.
I think that's a very good topic to discuss um, because I think a lot of collectors and maybe even, flippers or investors or whoever, they also sometimes have the same thought process. Go into a little bit more of what you were meaning when you said uh, needing a 10 versus a 9.
Yeah. The majority of people when they go to submit a card, they expect a 10. And unfortunately, people aren't realistic as to what their cards are really going to be. And if if you actually gave it a little bit more time and looked over your card pretty well and understand, not every card is a 10, and even a 10 is not a 10. So that's why I live at that PSA 9 level, and I'm happy at that PSA 9 level because it tells me, hey, it it's close, but there's something there that says it's not worthy of the 10, and that's fine. I like having that PSA 9. Eights frustrate me, but I'm very happy at the 9 level. If I get a 10, fantastic. I just feel that 10s are very unrealistic in this day and age as they were before, because before it was pretty common to get a 10 because there was a big leeway as far as what a 10 really was. And now that the belts have kind of been tightened up, a 10, really needs to be a 10 just on eye appeal alone. So,
Do you think part of it now? I know there's always a debate on grading companies and what their scales are. And I know you're specifically speaking on PSA. Do you think some of it is overlooked? And I'd never really heard this topic discussed before, but you had mentioned your work with Beckett as a pricing analyst.
mhm.
And from my memory, and you can confirm this, the Beckett magazine was never based off of a gem mint condition. It was always
Yeah,
mint, near mint. It
correct.
wasn't the gem mint never existed until grading came along. Um,
Correct.
do you think that has a little bit to do with it because the 9 is mint?
Yeah, I don't know. Things change. Everything changes. So, and there's evolutions of grading and, evolutions of collecting. So things change. So it's not that it's hard line that it has to be this type of a card and only this type of a card. It can only have this type of a flaw on it to qualify to be this grade or that grade. each company's different, and that's why I speak on PSA, because that's who I've always primarily used. I mean, I have a ton of everything else, but I I've always used PSA. I've always been a PSA guy, so it would be kind of, let's say, sour for me to sit there and speak on straight Beckett, or for me to speak on SGC. So
What is your thoughts as a PSA guy and the other companies have that tweener grade? And so we both know the the centering. I'll specifically speak on centering. The leniency for the centering standard with PSA is a little bit further stretched than the other companies with the 60/40.
mhm.
Do you think that it would hurt, help, or wouldn't change much if PSA implemented a tweener grade for that mint plus, to where maybe some of those tens that people are sour on, that they're like, oh, there's no way that's a 10, maybe it got popped into that 9.5. Do you think it would help the thought process a little bit on that?
I don't think people would honestly recognize the tweener grade, because I mean there already is one there in place, but that's really for some vintage stuff, and some stuff
But
that just wants to
they
get
don't
that
have the
little.
tweener. They don't have the tweener for the 9 to the 10 though. It's
No, no,
only
no, 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 no.
that's the one I'm speaking on, that nine
Oh yeah.
five, that mint plus.
No, no. You know what? As a PSA guy, I don't want to see that, because then I got to go back and go clean up everything that I have that I think may have a chance to be there at that 10. So I don't want to see that. It's just, it'd be too much for me, especially a guy who's got 3,000 plus slabs sitting in his collection. It, that would frustrate me. Got it.
So speaking on the 9 versus the 10, would you consider, and you mentioned something earlier on, a few minutes ago, about when people submit cards, they want the 10. And obviously, as someone who is a bulk submitter, I do notice this a lot. Even myself, I find catching myself in the same scenario sometimes. I always want the 10. And it's a common thing when you send a card in, you want to get the best grade, even like a gold label, like with SGC. People, is there any gold labels? And it's cool to see, it's cool to know that I think sometimes it's testing yourself on your knowledge of the condition of the card, or pre-screening your cards. And
Hmm.
it's cool when it pans out and you get that 10. But then I look back on it and I'm like, everybody wants the 10 when they're grading a card. But then when I'm buying a card, I very rarely ever look for a 10. So it's always like, I almost feel it's contradicting, because it's like you want the 10 because you want to sell it, and then the 10 carries the higher value. But most people I talk to, they don't look for a 10 when they're buying a card. So it's like, is is the 10 like the grade that really is wanted? Because if I'm not buying a 10, if I'm not hunting for a 10, then why do I want the 10 if I'm looking to sell it? It's kind of like a little funny mental contradiction that we battle with sometimes. What's your
Yeah.
thoughts on that? If you're buying a card, is there certain things you might look for in a 10, or do you look for really, really nice, sharp nines?
See, I'm never buying a 10. I'm the same. I'm just like everybody else. Because why are you going to pay the markup?
Right.
I mean, unless you truly have that disposable income to where you could say, okay, hey, yes, I'm going to pay 10x on this card because I really want it and I can't afford it, and it's not a problem. I'll do that. But I don't want to pay 10x on any card. So
Right.
I that's why I'm happy at the 9. That's why I say I'm happy at that PSA 9. And usually you can get that PSA 9 close to pretty much right at, spot on to comps, or even a little bit better if you have some type of a personal relationship with that person that you're buying from. So I'm always going to be at that 9 level. You know, so I'm hoping for the 10 when I send stuff in, but you know, how many 10s are you going to truly get anymore?
Yeah, I mean, and that's you're spot on right there. Like, and that's why I brought that up because it's always funny when we send cards in, and if you get that 9, and it's the reseller mentality because everybody's like, okay, the 10 is more, like the 10's worth more. But when you relatively like think about things, a lot of people aren't hunting for that 10. So you're kind of like, you got the card where theoretically the value is higher, but I feel your market, like the eyes on the market, is lower because I just feel like there's more people that are looking outside of a 10 than are looking for a 10. So your audience is larger when you don't have the 10 now, but in your mind, you're like, the 10 is the better card,
Yeah.
so it's worth more. So it's a very funny thing when you really sit back and think about it with grading. And when you brought it up, it was like, okay, this is something I want to talk about because I've spoke on it. I've collected cards for 30 plus years, but I never really cared about graded cards, right?
Right.
And what got me into collecting graded cards was my project that I did starting in 2017. That was the first time I really started hunting for graded cards.
Hmm.
And that was because I was trying to build, as I said, that national starting lineup roster.
Right. Hmm.
But even then, when I was doing that, and in 2017, obviously I was looking, as I stated before, Beckett slabs because they were easier to find. The cards I was looking for, the Bowmans, they were all in Beckett's. There was very few in PSA slabs.
Right.
So the availability was more in the Beckett slab. But even then, I was not hunting just specifically for 9.5s, let alone Beckett 10s. You know, that was not going to happen. So my goal, and many of the cards I picked up, they're Beckett 9 or better. That was the project I was building. And I've just carried that through because just as you said, you said, a lot of times you can get the 9 at comps or below. I feel a lot of times you can pick the 9 up, it's a good card, and you might actually save money on a raw copy. Like
Hmm.
the raw may at times be cheap or be more than the copy in a 9 because folks want that raw copy because of that mentality. Well, that might get a 10.
Right.
So a lot of times they'll pay more for the raw. And you're at, going back to the other, I believe episode 3, when we were talking about to grade or not to grade. Well, you mentioned saving money on grading fees. Well, if you can buy 9s and get them cheaper than buying the copy raw plus the grading fee, then now you have a graded copy of the card without even spending the grading fee. And
Yeah.
sometimes cheaper than the raw card.
Right. It becomes a win-win.
Yep. So now, as when we started this off, we hinted at a little popular subject that's going around that plays into this as well. Last night, and we are recording this Sunday, August 28th. Last night, the 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle, uh, coined as part of the Al Rosen find. It was deemed as the basically best looking copy or best known copy in existence, and it sold for, with buyer's premium, 12.6 million, smashing the records that we've ever seen in sports cards. And tying in with this topic that we're discussing, it was not a 10. Give me your thoughts on that card. It's a beautiful copy of a 52 Mantle. I
No,
haven't
that
seen all of the PSA 10 copies, but what is your feeling? Would you say it's the nicest looking copy to start off?
yeah. I mean, I've seen a few of those mantles that when they were in Al's possession. So I mean, I have a long history with Al. I used to go to a show that was in Pittsburgh in Coriopolis, and I would also see him in Anaheim a lot. And this is when I was younger. I was just a kid, And I would walk into a show, and Al would, of course, be front and center. He'd always have the first table. If he didn't have the first two or three tables when you walked into a show, he didn't want to do the show. He wanted to have that front row space there, so this way he can get all the action coming to him. And so I have seen a few of those mantles, that were in his possession, because he carried them around a little bit, a few of them, and he tried to, move some here, move some there. But truly, that's definitely one of the nicest ones that I've seen. So, and I'm truly happy that it's in an SGC holder versus the PSA holder. So that kind of tells you there. I'm not 100% PSA, and I prefer my a true vintage to be in an SGC holder. And just SGC back in the late 90s always had that respectability of holding those old premium vintage cards in their holder, and they always drew much more attention than any PSA holder did. Because people didn't they 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 liked PSA, but they didn't like that whole half point system not being there right from the very beginning. So
Do
so for
you?
the
I'm sorry.
okay,
Do,
go ahead.
just just real quick. Do you think? And you said that you're glad that's in the holder, and you spoke on the visibility, the eye appeal of it. True, just quick off the top of your head. Do you think that would have gotten a PSA 10?
Yeah, yeah, it would have. Yeah, there's no doubt that card would have gotten a PSA 10. But I know he had a couple other copies that were just as nice though. And Al wasn't the type of guy that was holding anything at that time. When Al would buy collections, he would already have stuff pretty much ready to go into somebody else's hands, within hours of him purchasing a collection. He was always buying a collection in just in thought, okay, I'm selling it to X, Y, and Z. And he'd move on. He'd take that money and roll on and go play somewhere else. Because the very next week, Al was at another show doing the same thing, setting up and buying more stuff. He was a guy that you were taking everything to. Sometimes, there was Kit Young, there was a couple other guys that were buying, at that time, pretty heavy. But Al had that notoriety because he had all those ads placed in the SCD magazine. He had an ad magazine inside the Beckett magazine. So Al was pretty prominent out there as far as buying. So everybody wanted to go to him because he always guaranteed that he paid you more money than anybody else. And I don't know that that's 100% true, but uh, he at least advertised that he did.
So he was essentially like the known guy for being a. His whole thing was a dealer, um, from what I gather, and I know you. We've discussed and mentioned it a little bit. You you travel around if somebody hits you up and buy collections and that sort of thing, and that's kind of how you build your collection off of that.
Hmm.
I see it over here on the East Coast. I try to keep eyes out for collections, um, but it kind of sounds like this is a strategy that's been going on for a very long time, and Al was very good at it. If people knew you and people knew you were a buyer, and that anytime they wanted to unload something, essentially, they could count on you. That leads you into many opportunities. So it's kind of cool to hear the stories of it and know a little bit of the history. So um,
Yeah, your money's always good, in Al's eyes. So he always says, well, he always said that if you have the card, I have the dollar. And he always pushed, and he would be very flamboyant at every show. And he would try to kind of like rub the salt in the wounds of everybody. Hey, everybody comes to me because I pay the most. So, a lot of people didn't, they really didn't care for Al, but I loved Al. Al was probably the nicest guy in the world to me when I was a kid, and I've never ever forgotten it. And I learned a ton of stuff from sitting with Al. When I would go to the shows, I would literally walk into the show, see him, and say hello to him. He'd say, "What do you got in your case, kid?" Or in your bag, because of course I was just carrying a little duffel bag at the time. He'd say, "What are you carrying in your bag?" And I go to cards. He goes, "Well, let me take a look at them." So I'd look at him, and he goes, what do you got?" And I said, "It's just junk." And he goes, "Yep, you're absolutely right. It is junk." He says, "Come sit down. You're going to get an education today." So I would sit there and watch him just buy stuff. And he was a machine. He was a human calculator. He would just sit there and flip through page after page after page of albums and just put numbers down. Boom, boom, boom. And then the guy would be there right next to him, open up the briefcase, paying the person out. I mean, it truly was a treat to actually watch that as a kid.
So, speaking on terms of this of the mantle, this 9.5 is now sitting well up top the throne at. Are we calling it 12.6? We have to essentially, I guess, call 12.6 because that's what the cost,
Yeah,
right? The hammer price,
right, correct. With the
with the
buyer's
buyer's
premium,
premium.
yeah.
And that's
Which,
a that's a
which,
topic that's debated upon, but I
yeah,
think it has to be 12.6 because that's what the buyer has to pay. So,
right, yeah.
um,
The juice is the juice. It doesn't matter if
yeah,
you're paying $10 for an item. You pay $10 for the item. It is what it is. So
right. So
it's still a six.
at 12.6, in your mind, and tying in with this conversation we've had with the nines, we'll call this 9.5 versus the 10. We know PSA enthusiasts would not allow a PSA 10 copy to sell for less than an SGC 9.5. We know that. Whether we can sit here and debate of whether or not that card would be a PSA 10, we can debate whether or not that is the best looking, the best copy in existence. We can debate that. But we know the importance of that label. We know the importance of that. The enthusiasts are going to say, well, this is a 10, this is a 9.5. In your mind, what do you feel if a PSA 10 copy went to market and now we see this 9.5 at 12.6? What do you feel the PSA 10 would actually bring in an open market setting?
It really depends on timing. Are we going to sell it next week? Are we going to sell it 3 months from now? I mean, they
Theoretically,
have.
let's say it's in within the let's go theoretical and it's within the next month while the hype is driven off of this 9.5 sale.
17 to 18,000.
17, you mean million?
Yeah. Yeah, no. I'm saying 17, 18,000 over to what that card was. Oh wait, no, excuse me, million. Yes. Jeez, I'm
Okay.
half asleep. I'm half asleep over here.
So you
Yeah,
think the 10 would do about 30?
yeah, about 29 to 30.
Okay. So that's kind of what people have thrown around is that the PSA 10. And this is why I feel this topic is great because based on principle, we know that eye appeal is the key factor on vintage, especially in vintage. And we could sit here and both of us, I ask you because I haven't seen all the PSA 10s, but we could say wholeheartedly if this was the best copy out there, the label would still draw the higher price based upon what the third party company labeled as condition, where one is saying mint plus and the other is saying gem mint. And that's
Hmm.
really interesting to me because everybody knows the importance of the eye appeal, but because a third party company says, well, this one we define under our standards, because obviously SGC and PSA, they have different standards.
Yep.
So SGC is saying this copy is the nicest copy out there, but under our standards, it's mint plus. And
Right.
then PSA says, well, under our standards, these copies are gem mint. And because of that label and because of the difference in standards, and even though one is maybe a little bit tighter than the other in the way they define things, the one with the labeling saying it's better condition, not eye appeal at this point, but the labeling saying better condition would sell for over 2x the copy that most would agree is the best looking copy out there. That's
Right.
very interesting.
And that's why I said I prefer it to be in an SGC holder versus it being in a PSA holder. I mean, there, like I said, there are other copies out there that look just as nice as that. I know that for a fact. I mean, it's just the finest graded example at this time. But
Right.
there most definitely there's others out there, and they're sitting in private collections. I
I think
mean,
it's a wonderful story, like tying back into episode 3 with the 5-year plan and everything. I think the story of this one is amazing. How the guy, when he bought it off of Al, he just tucked it away raw. I mean,
yeah,
that's an amazing move to just sit on that card for years and years and years, knowing it's kind of unprotected in a sense. It's in its raw form. It's in its vulnerable state.
hmm
He could have pulled it out and accidentally dropped it, and the corner gets dinged. I mean, he was playing with a lot of like what ifs there. Um,
yeah, but not at that time though.
well,
It just was.
he's he said he didn't touch it either. He the guy that owned it. He told the story. He tucked it away. It was in, I believe he said it was in a safe or something, never seen light or anything, and he just never touched it.
Hmm
I guess it's kind of like stashing wax in a sense. That wouldn't happen here. I love looking at my cards. Maybe that's why it's best that my strategy is buy low grade that looks nice, because then I can
Yeah,
set them here on display and enjoy them, and
right.
I don't have to worry about is there going to get a little speck of dust on it or something. I can enjoy them.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that dust on wax because that's what I was doing this morning. It was just after 6 o'clock in the morning, and I'm up on my shelves with a little duster dusting off my wax boxes like an idiot because I don't want no dust even on the settling on the boxes.
So here's a fun one to play in with the mantle, and then we'll kind of wrap up here shortly on this episode. Let's theoretically speak here, and let's say you were a play and you really wanted that card. You have your memories of Al Rosen. You say that that's the nicest known copy right now. You love the card. What kind of bank account number would you feel secure in having to think to yourself, I'm going to go drop 12 plus $1 million on a baseball card today? What number in your bank account would you need to be realistically okay? Because I've been sitting here thinking about this all morning, and I'm like, do you know what you can buy with just $10 million?
Hmm
And still have 2.6 left in the bank to like live
Yeah,
off. You could buy a lot of stuff.
yeah.
What kind of bank account would you need to say, all right, I'm going to go drop 12.6 million on this mantle today?
I would hope that I had 13 million in the bank, and that was my whole entire life savings. I'd be fine with it. I'd say, okay, if I had to have it, I had to have it. That's it. I'm gonna buy it, and as long as I can live off the rest of it and be happy, I would do it. I mean, I've never told the story how I ended up getting mine. I don't have a PSA 9. I don't have an SGC. You know, 9.5. Mine is a 5.5, and it's a PSA. And mine, of course, came from Al. So that's those are little things that that means so much more to me than that grade, because that's something that I have that, of course, I would never sell, but at least my children will get to sell. But for me, I go visit it maybe once every 3 months at the bank just to make sure that it's okay, and It's not walking away and let him know that, hey, I'm still there.
Well, I'm sure you bought that card, several years ago.
Yeah.
And let's be realistic, that card probably cost. I'm going to have to assume, and I don't know much about the history on it, and it's none of my business, but I'm going to assume that cost you less than what probably a one would cost you today, just
Yep.
because of the significance and increase that those
Yep.
cards have had.
Absolutely.
Um,
No doubt.
and it'll be interesting now that the mantle sits on the throne, what it does to the lower grades.
It'll
Um,
push. It'll definitely push them all up. They have
yeah.
nowhere to go but up now. When
So,
I got mine, Al gave it to me as a graduation present, and
oh,
my
so that was
grandmother.
back in like 54?
Yeah, nice.
I'm just kidding.
Damn. Now you're
I'm just
now you're
kidding.
now you're dating me.
No, no, I'm just playing.
Yeah.
All right, so
There is
one
a
last
wait,
question.
wait, hold on. There is a reason why we don't show our face. I don't want nobody to know that I'm 94 years old.
No, no, no.
I like having
Um,
that younger voice.
Hey, I've been told. Someone at the National came up to me and said, I thought you were a lot younger than you are. Now, granted, I do look older than I am, but they said I have a young voice. So I definitely know. I didn't ever realize I sounded like I had a young voice. But anyway, one last thing, and then we'll wrap up this episode, episode 4. Do you think the mantle now has solidified its place as the top card in the hobby, or will the Gretzky Wagner or another, obviously there's still PSA 10 mantles out there. I believe Ken has a PSA 10 51 mantle. I don't know if it's up for auction already or if it's going to be going up for auction. Do you think that the mantle, the 52, has solidified its place as the hobby, you know,
Darling,
top top tier, or will something else retake that throne?
it's always been the mantle. Never ever changed from that. Even though people can say, "Oh, well, no, the Trout was a big card. No, the Wagner's a big card." It's always been mantle. Mantle's always been the face of the hobby. We've always all recognized the 52 mantle as the holy grail. So it's never not been the card to have, and and of course a lot of people can't afford to buy that card in this day and age anyway. I mean, I'm so thankful that I was able to get mine when I did, when I was younger. But it, I I feel sorry for people now. I really do. I mean, you have to have a second, third, and sometimes even a fourth job just to be able to buy some of the stuff that's out there now. It's crazy.
So you're holding firm the mantle. And what I meant by the top tier card, I didn't mean. Do you think another card will outsell this price? Like,
Oh, I'm
where do
sure.
you think
Yeah,
we'll get? Where do you think we'll get to as far as highest ever sale? I mean, this is the first 8 figures, so
yeah, it is, but who knows? I mean, the our market is so finical. I mean, it's great today. It's not tomorrow. So if as long as it's good premium vintage stuff, it's going to draw that number. But it's Mantle. It's always been Mantle. So I can't I can't say that, unless you're finding another T206 on a Swagner that has not been trimmed and not been thrown into a PSA 8, slab. If you find one that's a legit 9 or a legit 10 out there, then maybe it might be able to buck that. But it's always been Mantle. So I think now it kind of set the ceiling for now. That's why I asked you, are you talking now, or are you talking 3 months down the road, or are you talking 3 years down the road? Because a lot changes in that time frame, because of economic status and how people are actually collecting, and truthfully, how many people will still be collecting. Everybody thinks that there will be more collectors, and I'm one to say there will be, as long as people can still afford to buy stuff. But that's affordability is key in this hobby.
Well, I think that's a very good statement here, and that's also kind of why I was asking, like, where would you be comfortable, um, with the amount in your bank account, and that was just hypothetically speaking. Just to touch on it on my side of it, I think I would like. I I actually told the missus last night, and this was before the card had the official sale price. I think it was at like 9 million in the extended period,
Hmm.
but the buyer's premium had pushed it over the 10 million mark. And I
Hmm.
told her, I was like, it's always been crazy to me, even thinking about spending $10,000. Like, because I don't have a card that I've spent 10,000 on. Together, I obviously have over $10,000 spent, but on one single card, $10,000, I don't have any, and it's always been a thought that I'm like, even if I had the money, it would be difficult for me to say I'm gonna spend that on a card. And now we're seeing people spending 10 million. It's kind of crazy the way things have progressed. I think for me personally, I would need to be very deep into the billions to say, okay, I'm gonna go out and spend 12.6 million on a card today. But then you're talking like $100, in a bank account that has, a couple thousand. So but I
Yeah.
think this has been a good topic. Great Monday conversation for folks out there. I hope you all uh have a great start to your Monday. Look for episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And hope you have a wonderful week, guys. Again, we appreciate your support. Like, comment, and subscribe.
Real quick, Bobbles. I do want everybody to learn the history of Al Rosen. So go on YouTube and just Google Al Rosen, Rosen, and just watch some of his videos. And there are some videos out there of him just doing some of his buys, and you'll get a little bit behind the picture view of Al. Al was a special guy in my life. I truly loved Al, and I I hope that more people speak about him and actually talk about the man and who he was, instead of just because he bought cards. Al was a little bit more than that. He was definitely a good guy.
I think to your point, and we might actually be recording this at a bad time because I think there's going to be a ton of content on YouTube about this sale. But it was something that fit in with what we left off of episode 3 with the 9 versus the 10. And hopefully, we aren't the only ones that had some content of in context around Mr. Al Rosen, and others will speak on him as well, and not just about the card itself. But
Yeah.
go on YouTube, search Al Rosen, AL, and then Rosen.
Yep.
And as Refractor said, do a little bit of history. It's always awesome to learn hobby history, especially for folks who, and there's nothing wrong with being new or welcome to the hobby. Um, but there is a lot of interesting takes of things that have went on throughout the years. So, but that's all we have for you for episode 4. Hope you all have a wonderful start to your week. And as always, thank you for listening.